We begin with a developing story. Now, Labor Secretary Alex Acosta is right now in the middle of a press conference where he's defending a non-prosecution deal he signed off on for billionaire financier and a registered sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Now, Acosta claims he actually sought tougher penalties than what lower-level prosecutors were seeking. He's been under increasing pressure to resign after new federal sex trafficking charges were unveiled against Epstein earlier this week. Now, years ago, Acosta helped secure what has been described as a sweetheart deal for Epstein. Now, the deal allowed Epstein to avoid federal charges and serve only 13 months of jail time under very special circumstances. Now, this was despite allegations he molested and trafficked numerous underage girls. And we're talking about 30 girls here. Investigative journalist Ben Swann is following the story and joins us in studio today. Ben, the press conference is going on right now, so I'm not going to hold you to all the details.
Sure.
But the most important question, did Secretary Acosta resign, as many Democrats and Republicans are now starting to call for?
Yeah, he did not, and it's very clear, I think, from what he was saying today, he has no plan to resign through all of this. In fact, today it looks like he was getting up to give his side of the story, explain what happened, kind of the history behind this, the backstory behind it, and also to kind of position himself so that he can get the president's continued support in all this. Because however this press conference goes today kind of depends on how President Trump's view of him goes, right? Because President Trump is swayed very easily by image. I will say this, having listened to the press conference and what he said so far, and you know I'm not a fan of this deal and I've been very critical of it, I think he has done a very good job of explaining why they made the deal that they did, what the time was like at the time. Because remember, this was back in 2007, 2008 when all this is going on. This is not happening today in 2019. It's a very different culture we're in right now, a very different time. He talked about issues with the CRV, which is that the Human Rights or the Criminal Rights Act that protects people today. And then also he talked a lot about victim shaming and how much that has changed in the courts today compared to at the time.
Well, you know, you bring up a very good point there, because it was talked about, I mean, obviously this was pre-Me Too movement. We're obviously a lot more sensitive to the subject today, that a lot of the reasons these women were afraid they were going to go through some extreme victim shaming for their backgrounds. That was one of the reasons that he made this deal on it. But Acosta today, the fact that he's even having to go out in public and explain this case again, hasn't he already somewhat lost in the court of public opinion?
Well, so here's my problem with it, is that if you watch any news media other than RT America, right, and you try to understand this story, you're not going to understand it at all, because you're going to tune in and say, I don't understand who this guy is. In fact, if you watch this story, you would think the villain in all this is Alexander Acosta. That he is the one who is actually the one victimizing these girls. He's not. Jeffrey Epstein is the man who was victimizing these girls. Jeffrey Epstein is the one with the sex island. Jeffrey Epstein is the one who was hiring this madam to go around and collect girls for him at local high schools. Jeffrey Epstein is the one with powerful friends who he supposedly partied with in these different ways. And so it is important that we keep our focus on the person or persons who actually perpetrated crimes. Alexander Acosta did not perpetuate a crime against anyone, even if he was a lousy prosecutor. And again, I think he does a pretty good job of explaining a couple of these details, including, look, this very important fact. He says that the reason that the women, the young girls in this, were not told about the settlement in advance, they had no voice in that. He explained it this way. He says that at the time, that if Jeffrey Epstein had not kept the deal and had broken that agreement, they would have had to go ahead and take him to trial. And if they had, that would have opened up defense attorneys to now question those girls and say, so when did you find out you were getting money for this?
And once again, it brings it up to the public and these girls, the possibility of victim shaming. I get that at this stage of it. But as I'm reading on Twitter, I'm reading conservatives are even saying this is not helping, because as long as Acosta is in office, Trump is still going to be pegged. And we're starting to hear the stories of these women right now. Their faces are being, and they were 15 years old, they were 13 years old. Those are going to be made political and pegged against, at this stage, President Trump, as long as Acosta and Trump stick together.
Well, and remember this, that the media will tell you that Alexander Acosta is a bad guy and they've got to get rid of him, and then everything will be fine. Everything will not be fine, first of all. Second of all, that photograph of Clinton and Melania and Hillary Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein all standing together in this photo. Those photos are going to hurt Trump more than Alexander Acosta being labor secretary. So the idea, the lie, if you will, that this will all go away if you get rid of him. No, it's not. It's almost like they're looking for Trump to make an admission of guilt by having Acosta in the administration at all, get rid of him, and now they're going to continue to do this. Again, let's go back to the important point here, which is Jeffrey Epstein. He is the one that we need to be focused on, and not these sideshows that are taking place over Alexander Acosta.
Well, here's the thing about Acosta. I also felt like he needed to come in today because one of the things he said is, I was also told by others that I should try to downplay this. That was one of the rumors. The thoughts was, did he name names in this press conference of saying people that were also involved? I mean, we're talking Rudy Giuliani, Alan Dershowitz. There were some very powerful names right now that were involved in this legal process, even going all the way up to some of the names that we know today that were in the FBI that was involved.
Again, but Scottie, that's the point, is that there are a lot of powerful people who have been named. There are lawyers who are already circling the wagons, warning media that if these documents get released and they become unredacted, essentially, that you better be careful about who you're reporting about, who have been named in these, right? These are big name players on both sides of the political aisle, but we're not talking about them today. We're still talking about Trump's labor secretary as if he himself is a predator, and that is scary to me, to watch how this spin is taking place. It's almost like everyone is bringing this guy out to say somebody's got to take the fall for all this, and they don't want it to be Epstein because he has too many names, too many people connected to him. Acosta doesn't have anybody connected.
It will be interesting to see. I agree. We need to hold the criminal, who committed the crimes, accountable, but he's also going to name names. But I also have to go after those folks that possibly made it a little bit easier for them to do what they did. And we don't know if there were any future victims that happened after he was released out of jail.
And one other important point on this, which is what Acosta said today, is that his office intervened because if the state had just brought their case, that there would have been nothing. No jail time, no fines, and there would have been no registration as a sex offender for Jeffrey Epstein. If that is correct, and that's an easy thing to find out, if that is correct, then his office actually did something when the state office was doing nothing. And there is something to be said for that.
Well, it will be interesting to see how this goes in the hours that follow this press conference as people start to fact check what he says. Thank you, Ben, for following this. I know this is a quick turnaround of a story.
Yeah, you got it.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.